Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today is Feedback Episode 24. We are really excited today to be joined by media artist and composer Olivia Block and art historian and scholar Magdalena Moskalewicz. So we'll be talking with both of them today about Olivia's piece for us, Calibration Circle, which is from both 2016 and 2019. We have two versions under our belt, and that piece was featured on Yarnwire Currents Volume 6. Don't forget, you can always send questions to us ahead of time at feedback@yarnwire.org or join the live chat on Facebook or YouTube to submit questions in real time. We'll try to get to as many as we can. So with that, we're all really excited to have both of you with us today, and I'll hand it over to you, Magdalena.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here. I'm very excited to be meeting Olivia for the first time. I have been following your work, Yarnwire's work, for about 8 years now. We were just speaking before the show, and I realized that the first time I saw you perform was in 2012. And you have this really fascinating to me status in the music world, in that you work as performers. Obviously, you're a new music quartet, but you also work as commissioners for your pieces. Something that also interests me as a person who has that role often in the art world. I work with visual artists commissioning the work. So you are both performers and co-creators of the material that you later end up performing. And so I was wondering how you select your composers, and specifically what made you select Olivia and approach her with a commission for this piece. And also maybe if you can share some more of the background of your decision making, is what was the actual prompt? Like, what is it that you actually ask the composer? Like, do you give them more specific instructions of what you expect from them, or is it a completely free-form carte blanche? I'm just really curious about that process.
It's a great question. I feel like we have a ongoing conversation as a group that's just, we're all very curious about music that's out there, going to shows, in the before times, going to shows.
Like now we troll Bandcamp like everyone else.
Thanks, Peter, Mark, Zach. We do a lot of listening and really decide to work with people whose music we find some resonance with, or at least their practice is somehow resonant with what we like, but also in general, it's really just what we like musically, I think at the beginning of when we started working with composers, a lot of these people were our friends and colleagues, so they were kind of easy decisions to make. It's like, oh, do you want to just do something, and you're in music school or something, and it's very easy. But after that, it was really kind of building out these relationships from the different scenes that each of us was involved in. I feel like each composer or artist or that we work with, it's not a very far stone's throw from like either music that we're all listening to already or interested in, or we know that person directly. And I think in Olivia's case, I forget how it came about, but I feel there was like, someone probably sent me an email that was like, have you heard this record or something? And we were like, wow, this is cool. 'Cause I don't think we'd met before, this project. And if I'm remembering correctly, I think there was some crazy, probably terrible idea that we were going to make pieces that were like sound installations, like possible installation, possible concert kinds of things, because there's a lot of discourse about, you know, sound art and installation. And I was like, well, we have done things like that, you know, and it was kind of a challenge to find some composers who maybe could work in both areas. The presentation of sound installations never came to pass. But so, I mean, but we ended up with some interesting pieces, Calibration Circle being one of them. I don't know if you have anything else, Laura.
Do you have anything else, Ning or Lauren?
Yeah, I think what Russell said is really accurate. I think the only thing that I would add is that, you know, and I think we've said this maybe in other episodes too, where a lot of times when we reach out to composers, if one person is really feeling strongly about someone, even if the rest of us aren't yet familiar with their work, the rest of us are usually on board. And I would say that has always tended to work out for us, which is very fortunate. It's a very democratic and trusting sort of environment in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Russell and Laura.
And Olivia, do you remember what it looked like from your end? Do you remember receiving this commission?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because I had forgotten about the initial idea about the sound installation aspect of it. So it's funny to think about now this piece and how it's evolved with all of y'all and Yarn Wire and the initial kind of prompt for it. So I had forgotten about that. It's funny because it was a while ago. But yeah, I was super excited because I had heard of Yarn Wire and was familiar. I was actually familiar with Yarn Wire because I had been on a panel for what was formerly known as like New Music. I'm forgetting the name that they were, but it's now New Music USA. And I remember like seeing this Yarn Wire piece where there was like blocks on a table. Like this was like one of the things that we were evaluating. And I was like, this is really cool. Like, what is this? Who are these people? Because they were basically just like moving these blocks around. And I was like, this is awesome. And so I remembered them from that. And so it was cool to like hear from them later, kind of full circle.
Nice. Okay, maybe this is a good moment to actually see and listen to a part of the piece. The piece is about 20 minutes long, if I'm not mistaken, but maybe let's take a look at the first 2 minutes.
Nice.
So the piece is called Calibration Circle. The title that comes from the film realm, right? It comes from the cinematic realm. And in the introduction to the piece, Olivia, if I may allow myself to quote you,
Sure.
in the notes, in the introduction to the piece, you say that two unseen aspects of cinema are revealed and utilized to frame two central components of the score: film countdown leaders and Foley art. And we actually saw a film countdown leader during this preview. Can you explain what these are to begin with? Because people may be unfamiliar with this technology. And also, what made you reach specifically into the film industry for inspiration for this piece?
Yeah. First, I want to direct attention to Matt Soar, who is the artist who actually put those film leaders together, as you saw in front of the piano, the iPad score. So I would direct everyone to his website because he's the one who does research on these leaders. It's very interesting. It's called lostleaders.ca because he's in Canada. He teaches at Concordia. So a film leader is in the beginning of a 35 millimeter or 16 millimeter film. Excuse me. You see the number countdown, numerical countdown, and you'll also see like all of the numbers and symbols on the film leader tell the projectionist kind of what to do. So it's almost like a score for a projectionist. So the film leader tells the projectionist to unmute the sound or to like open up parts of the projector. Excuse me. So that's kind of like it's just this part of the film watching experience that I never really paid attention to before, but then I became interested in. And then the Foley sound is like when you see sort of photographs of people like crunching things in front of microphones or doing things to actually make the sound design in a film. And so there's something kind of very performative and beautiful about that to me. And there's also a parallel in what we are doing because the film is kind of like a visual score for the actions of the performers. So my interest in both of those things are kind of in their parallel functioning to the world of like scoring and sound.
Yeah, because the piece, in fact, has not one score, but two entirely different scores, right? We have a quartet, we have two pianos and two percussions. These two scores seem to be like almost separate from each other. Actually, the way they're organized, you organize the piano score into 5 sections, and then the Foley's, the percussions have 8 sections with completely different titles. So can you speak more about that? It's just like a very complex piece in these many levels and many categories.
Yeah, I decided to do it that way because I'm kind of interested in these structural systems that kind of make up these productions, like it's whether it be the backstage kind of like rehearsal of an orchestra or all of the things that go into making a film, for instance, like a cinematic production. So the having these two things happen simultaneously was sort of like what I perceive that complex system to be like. It's just like all of these things that are kind of working in this orbit to make this other thing happen. So it's sort of like this idea of just these frameworks happening simultaneously, but they work together somehow.
And is this something that's recurring in your work, or was it a specific research for this piece?
It does. No, I would say that it does recur in my work, although not usually in scored pieces. I'm trying to actually think that maybe that's not true. But in my own process, I do work with like different scales of time and stuff that are kind of overlayered a lot. So it's kind of familiar for me, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you also use footage for this. So we have the instruments, we have the 4 performance, and then we also have an actual film footage that these Foleys are made for. Can you speak more about where this footage comes from?
Yeah, the footage is actually, in this iteration of it, is like footage of myself kind of doing a backstage sort of preparation for an installation project. So it kind of, again, is like speaking to this larger idea of like structural kind of systems that make other things happen. So all of the footage is kind of from like, it's actually video, it's not footage. It's video of me kind of setting things up, or other people setting things up in Poland in this sanatorium building that had a fire. So it was all broken down. And so you could see the kind of materials, the constituent materials of like the bricks and the wood and all of this kind of stuff. So it made me think of like the materials that everyone would be using to make these sounds being very apparent. So that's kind of why I chose the film that I did.
That's interesting. So there is also an element of architecture that comes into play through that, into the sound.
Always. I mean, I think that's such a huge part of sound composition, as opposed to like musical, just strictly musical composition, is architecture. It's and especially thinking about the piano and like the inside of the piano, and how like Ning and Laura were like using the resonance of the piano. That's completely architectural to me.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a good moment to take a look at another excerpt from the piece, the one where you use bricks. Yeah, so in this excerpt, we really could see the details of the performance of like all the hands, I mean, including your hands, Olivia, in the video, and then the hands of the performance. Ning, Laura, and Russell, do you want to tell us more about the experience of this piece, of what it's like for you as a performer, and what are the particular challenges, if any, of this particular work?
It's so different for each of us. I think it's most interesting in some ways for Russell to start, because
No, please. Pianos. You guys should.
All right, I will start. So I think at very first, my very initial reaction about approaching this piece, back when Olivia gave us the score in 2016, I think, first time we played it, was very much, it's like constructing a sound, constructing a sort of a sound image in my head, because it's not as you can see, not a standard score. So it's almost like sort of a game of puzzle for me to put like, oh, if I did this, then it becomes like this, and then I do this section, it's like that, but I need to follow the instructions correctly, otherwise my puzzle is not going to be put together correctly. You know what I mean? And so I think from there we were able to see sort of a contour of this puzzle. But I think Laura and I discussed sort of the instructions quite a bit in the first time we played it, because sometimes we're just there were a lot of instructions and doing those instructions not so correctly, and also sometimes forgetting certain things. And I think it felt much better, felt much more like, oh, I'm really understanding what I'm doing the second time, when everything became just a little bit clearer in the mind, and how that sound all put together. I mean, I think Russell and Ian, their sound is like kind of totally separate from us, and then but then the two put together is like really, really cool. It really just felt like a game of puzzle for me in many ways.
Yeah, I like that idea. It does kind of feel like you're playing a game a little bit, because like you have rules to follow. It's like changes for each section of the piece, and it's actually kind of weirdly freeing to not have to make all the choices yourself in that way. And so I think rather than the challenge, like the challenges are different in this piece than they would be for other types of works. And like a particular challenge for me was in the performance, not to look at the video, which is what I wanted to do, and to sort of, because we're contributing to part of that sound, but in a way, we are totally separate from them. And so to sort of resist that urge to be like a good chamber music player, the way, a lot of times we're taught. It's a different thing in this piece.
Yeah, and then on the percussion side, I mean, they both said it, but like it's totally different. So I still to this day have no idea what they're doing. I look at the piano parts, I'm like, sure, yeah, I'm not going to read it. We don't have to deal with that. But on the percussion side, the challenge is being a Foley artist and not being trained as a Foley artist. I think in an early time, I was trying to remember, did you send us a YouTube video once, Olivia? Okay, yeah. I was searching and searching for this because it's so hilarious. There's a video of real Foley happening, but it's like a fight scene. And there's like two people, and they're running around some amazing studio with like real close mics on every surface, the floor. So you see them like pitter-pattering along and running. And then there's like the sound of a punch, and I think there's a huge slab of like a steak
meat
or like a meat, and someone's like hitting that and like it makes an amazing sound. And I think we must have watched that like 30 times, just waiting for that moment, and breaking glass and all this stuff. And so then you're like, this is what you're gonna do. We're just like, well, I don't know. Like we've never made sounds that are meant to be heard under such a microscope, so I don't know what constitutes the sound of someone walking upstairs. I don't know how to make that sound, or any of these things. And so that was the biggest challenge. It's like, what materials do we use? How are they going to sound with a microphone? Is it even going to read correctly? So
the materials were not specified. Sorry to interrupt, but just to confirm, the materials were not specified in the score, right?
No. So there were two different videos actually. And so that is something else. Like in the first version of it, I think you did say like wood, metal, for example. You know?
Yeah. Okay.
And
I
so,
probably did. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're like, okay, direction. We're going to use that, you know, like what do we start with? And so I think we got piles of stuff in order to make textures and sounds and things like that. And then in this one, you know, even the simple act of having a human in the frame, all of a sudden you're like, okay, I can make those motions along with that person. You know, you can kind of like embody the image that's on the video and do what they do. I may not be in a space like with leaves or something, but I can get a plastic bag and make that kind of sound. So like really having a human on screen helped make Foley closer to being possible, you know? But yeah, it's like, I think we needed, really, if we're going to be real Foley artists, we probably need, you know, more gear or more dirt, more stones.
You would have a Foley pit.
We would have
probably
a Foley
actually
pit.
have one of those pits. Yeah.
So, yeah, but it was cool because, you know, using our limited resources, which is, you know, I mean, we have a lot of gear in here, but it's all instrumental things. And so kind of breaking out of that was really challenging and fun.
I forget a lot that it's actually kind of challenging if you live in New York to find the right kind of garbage to use. Like because in Chicago, you can really like drive down alleys and find bricks or whatever.
We have the alleys. They don't have the alleys.
We have alleys.
Anymore.
I know. It's so funny. You just don't even think about it. But I've gotten so many things that make sound from alleys, right? Like it's just, especially in Pilsen where you are, there's such good alleys and things like, so I didn't even think of that, but it's so interesting to hear them talking about this because I really forget like the experience of Ning and Laura versus Russell and Ian is so different even in terms of like dimension, because really what Ning and Laura are doing they are kind of doing a puzzle. I mean, it's basically like about reading these numbers and doing certain things when the numbers happen and it's very like, I think of it as kind of almost two-dimensional. It's very like flat, whereas what Ian and Russell are doing are creating like this three-dimensional space of sound that kind of, as Russell said, that reads as realistic with this video. But then there's also this other aspect of that video in this recent iteration where there's things that are happening backwards and forwards and fast and slow. So there's also this other layer of like thinking about how changing the speed in a film changes the sound or something. So actually like this piece is super challenging in these weird ways. Like they did such a good job. It's kind of amazing, you know, to think about it. But
I do also want to point out, like when Ning, you said, you know, as we're performing, you get a different experience, right? Like when you guys are playing and because Ian and I don't actually have to practice together. We do in the end to see like what we're doing and how it's going to combine, but really it's upon each person, I think probably in the piano part too, to like figure out your path in the piece. You do give instructions on like one player needs to be foreground and background in the percussion Foley thing. So we do assign ourselves that, but then kind of we have to do the work ourselves to do it. And then finally when we're in performance is the first time that we hear everything happening together. And I think Ning, you said it was kind of magic or something like that. And that's exactly how I experience it too. And I kind of have to tune it out because I might start playing my Foley a little bit musical, you know, instead of like, you know, paying attention to the video. So it's kind of cool.
Actually, Laura, when you said before that it was hard for you not to watch the video, it made me think that it would have actually been better to have all three scores up on video. I think that would have been so much like, see, every time I do these things, like especially with a you know, like a group like this who's so creative, like I'll be like, oh, next time we'll do it this other way, you know, because they're just so good. And I never want to do like this whole idea of like doing one score that never changes. I just don't understand that, especially with a group like this. Like it's just like so dynamic. So I'm always thinking like, okay, next time. We'll
2022.
Yeah.
Yeah. When
exactly.
performances happen.
Yeah. I know. Oh gosh.
You just said, Olivia, a moment ago, you just spoke about the realism, that like the sounds were realistic. And in fact, in these notes that you made for Ian and Russell, you say, and again, I allow myself to quote you, the aim of the performance is to create the sounds exactly at the time the event is occurring on the video in a convincing way. Convincing. You should try for realism.
Yeah.
And that realism, that phrase somehow struck me. And now also Russell speaking about that a slab of meat that like produces like the realistic sound. I want to ask you, and this might be too philosophical of a question, but as a non-musician and non-composer, I'm allowing myself to ask a very broad philosophical question, which is, what does this realism of sound mean to you? Especially in a piece that's so experimental. And I think it's a question for all of you, so both Olivia and the Yarn Wire guys.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, two things that are interesting about the realism aspect. It's actually not necessarily about the realism, but it's about trying to make the realism, and that effort of trying to be realistic versus kind of like what is actually happening. Because if you think about it, there's no way to actually do that. It's impossible, you know? And so like there's something really, to me, very beautiful about just like the motions and the performative actions and efforts to make that happen, you know? And so I like that, seeing those two, sort of that dichotomy happen. And then the other thing is like, I think that there's something about just the material aspect of sound that is interesting, and it's very present in this piece too. It's kind of like you had mentioned before, architecture, and part of the appeal or just part of architecture is the material, is the sound making materials. And so that's in order to be realistic, you have to use these certain materials. And so it's very much about like exploring the materials of like brick or sand or something. So
it's super interesting to hear you say that about the intention, like the impossible task of trying to be realistic. And, you know, I don't know why it came to my mind, but I have that, like, the sensation that statement applies to a lot of the music we play sometimes. It's that we're trying to achieve something impossible, but it's more important. What's more interesting is about the effort that you expend, or the sort of accidental results sometimes of what happens when you're trying to achieve a specific goal. And I think people say that sometimes rightfully in a somewhat derogatory way, like some music that it becomes unnecessarily difficult to get this sort of overwrought performance from a musician. But I actually think that there are other pieces that use that sort of idea really successfully. So it's just so interesting to hear you say that.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, you can apply that to everything. I just feel like it's not even necessarily like by design of any certain kind of difficult piece or not. It's just like life is like that, to me at least. It just feels like it's just like, oh, it's okay. Yeah, it's never quite, I guess I always feel like I see life as a series of failures maybe, and just the efforts to get to that thing are like interesting. So I think that's part of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I think also, like, you know, in terms of like I keep saying like a like a group like this, like it's very rare to work with a new music ensemble that knows how to kind of like have less limitations and kind of work with this material. So any kind of like effort is going to be an expert effort, or any kind of failure will be an expert failure. So whatever kind of failure like Ning and Laura would have in the piano would be beautiful because they're doing it. So it's also like if it was just some like fifth grader or like some kind of amateur musician, it might not be as interesting, but it's just like they know how to do this kind of work. So it's just like, oh, it's a beautiful failure.
We're
more
pros at
interesting than
failing.
anything.
Yeah, we're
I
super good at failure.
I mean, and it's funny that I keep using this word because I never thought of this before in connection with this piece, or like, I mean, because they did the piece pretty flawlessly, actually. So, but it's a funny way to think of it, actually, like this idea of effort and like trying to get somewhere or something. Yeah. So
Because as you were saying earlier, like the piece in itself is unrealizable, right?
It's
if
impossible.
you're striving for realism, but it's in fact impossible.
yeah, I mean, it's impossible. First, because everything's impossible, and secondly, because in terms of the video part of it, like again, back to the kind of like fast forwarding, like the repetition, like those things make real. I mean, the film itself is not realistic, so it's doubly impossible because of that.
Russell, do you want to speak about how you and Ian, if you can speak for him, decided to interpret that condition, that instruction for realism?
Yeah, I mean, I think because I forget if there was sound in those clips. I think there was sound in the clips. And so I think,
so too.
Yeah, I think we went off of those kinds of as prompts, but also, I mean, everyone knows what footsteps sound like. Everyone knows what I guess not everyone knows what a sanatorium sounds like, but an empty building walking.
I hope
what
not.
that sounds like. But and being on the Bushwick Ridgewood border in a like loft-like space, we kind of know what these big spaces with materials sound like, right? So it wasn't that far of a stretch to find similar materials, in fact, to work with, tiles, stones, and things like that. And the funny thing is the backwards stuff was almost not easier, but it wasn't so hard to figure out because we're so mediated now. Like, I know what the sound of scrubbing on a film, like doing editing, sounds like, and that is almost like in my ear more than a nature sound, sadly as that is. But I know these editing sounds, and so like, how do you stop
really
something? Shoop, it's easy, and like, how do you make it backwards? Do a reverse kind of thing. So, I think being familiar with processes and spaces kind of helped with it. But really, we kind of tried to use what we had on hand in order to be realistic. And, if it's wood, we're going to search for wood in the scene. If it's carpet, some carpet. And there's a speaker that you pick up in one of the scenes, or someone picks up. And so
someone picks it up, yep.
Yeah, I think I had a speaker. Or something heavy that like you pick up and make a sound because it's heavy. So
and it to me, I feel like all of those considerations are so fascinating. Like it's just like it really does kind of come back to this idea of realism and the qualities that make a sound what it is. The weight of something, for instance, or in the piano, it's all about the material of yarn, wire, wood, all of these things. So it's just kind of back to that idea of like the qualities that make a sound what it is.
Yeah, realism as familiarity. That is interesting. And as you were saying it, I realized that when I saw that footage in this video that we're just showing, the image that housed that architecture looked very familiar. And it took me a moment to realize it's because it's Poland. It just looks like home to me. That's where I'm from.
Interesting.
So there was like this familiarity of image and realism of image to me. And I wonder if that would be as easy and as immediate with the reality and familiarity of sound. But speaking of that, when I experienced this piece for the first time, it was in, I think, 2016 or 17 in Arts Club of Chicago. So it was the first version of the piece.
Yeah.
And it actually did not have that element of the projection onto the wall. I remember Ian and Russell were looking into their laptops. So the audience, even though we were sitting around them on the floor, we didn't necessarily follow the image as directly as in this footage that we saw. Oh yeah, and here we see a few photos that I actually took back then. So I wanted to ask you, Olivia, why did you decide to make this change? Like, why did you update the piece from 2016 and 2019?
One reason is because just for change, like as I said before, I'm kind of like I'm not good at this having a static score that just gets. It's almost like I'm like, oh, I can work with these people again. So I'm going to change this because I can, and like I'm going to see what happens. So so it was kind of like, okay, we had before the quality of like the density of the sound was very different, and they were looking at the video, but the audience couldn't see it, and that was just different. So hold on. Pass to the next person. I've got a drink.
I think it was a question we talked about. It was like, I remember in the first one, you're like, it's not projected. It's only for you to see.
I did, yeah.
You know, and so there was kind of a secret element. And then I remember getting the newer one, and there was this element of projection. And I think I'm not going to say one worked better than the other. You know, they're different processes. But I feel like people could maybe see the structure.
Yeah, I think it worked better.
Yeah.
I do. I think the first time I was thinking like, I don't want it to be apparent why these sounds are being made, you know? And same for the piano. Like, I don't think, and now I'm thinking again, like, oh, it would be cool for people to see those numbers and see, because it's almost like with both of the scores, if we're calling it two different scores, it's clear that there's some reason why these sounds are being made, but it's not clear what that reason is. And so then the choice becomes like, do we want to show people why that they're making the sounds? And I actually think with a piece that's as weird as this, like, it's kind of a good idea. Like, the more you can show, the better, because it's never going to make sense, you know? So yeah, so it makes more, I think it made more sense to show the film.
So it was really the orientation towards the viewer.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Just thinking about the audience and how they were experiencing and what they knew. And I think also like this, it's just beautiful to see with the motions of a figure in a film, seeing like all of these other motions happening. I just think that there's something like that wasn't there in the initial footage, which was just houses being demolished. I think, you know, like Russell said, like, there's a figure in this one, and that happened to be me, but it could have been anyone. And so there's just this cool, I think the performance was very beautiful, just watching like Laura and Ning like doing these things in the piano, and then these like, it's just like the performative aspect works with the image projected, I think.
I like that it's you too. It's, now that I'm thinking, it's like you're almost like a conductor in it, you know? Yeah. If we're going to think classical, you know, you're like kind of directing it. But also the first video you sent us was, like you said, it was houses being demolished. And I remember that was really a lot more difficult to get variety, you know?
It was, that's right. I do remember that. Yeah.
And so these were hard, but, you know, we had specific scenes. I mean, it was specific before, but like we knew kind of what to do and what trajectory to take.
And it worked, I think, better with the piano parts too, just in terms of like, I think like in this iteration, it was like the sounds were much less sparse. And so it kind of worked better in a way with what, it wasn't like a complete contrast as it was before, but this time it was kind of a little bit more of like all of a piece. I think I was thinking of that too. So, yeah.
Interesting. So how weird is this piece? You said at some point, Olivia, just a moment ago, that with a piece as weird as this, I want to know, as an outsider to the world of music, for you, Olivia, but also for you, Yarn Wire people, like, how weird is this piece on a spectrum of not weird at all to very weird?
It's really weird. I think it's real. First of all, I really like that question. I love that question because I always have that question about things myself, that I am not in the, you know, like doing that thing. I think it's pretty weird, and which is why I appreciate Yarn Wire like doing this piece, like really just being like, okay, I get this, I understand this, you know. I think that it's pretty weird, but I think Yarn Wire could answer that better, actually.
Scale from 0 to 10. How weird is it?
If with 10 being the weirdest?
Yeah.
Let's each, like on the count of 3.
I think.
Okay. Yeah. On the count of 3, we'll each say what we think it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
1, 2, 3.
7.5.
3.
What? Who said 3? Come on.
I don't know. It's hard for me. It feels like if it's not judgmental, then sure. I mean, it could be anywhere on the spectrum. I don't think it's that
totally
weird.
kidding. No, don't let me intimidate you like that. It's total. No, I'm actually very impressed that you all didn't say. Sometimes my
Well,
stuff
you said
isn't
8.
as weird.
I said
as I
7.5.
think.
Yeah.
So y'all were in the 8.
And Lawrence said 7.5 and 8, right? So you were
Yeah.
very close
Yeah.
to each other.
Close.
Yeah, we were close.
You guys
Yeah.
think
Our
it's
part
weird?
was really
Hey.
weird, and
Yeah.
your guys' part was less weird.
You know,
Maybe
we're asked to do whatever all the time. I mean, bucket of water, dip a crotale, sure. Follow an image on the screen, all right.
I know it's
Trash,
true,
sure.
but I also think that there's something about like percussion, and in a way, like I actually think of, and I think I remember talking to Laura about this. Like, I consider like the kind of piano playing that Laura and Ning do to be almost percussion sometimes. Like it's like once you get out of the realm of like only keys and you get inside the piano, then you do kind of become like percussion players if you're a pianist. And so I think that in the realm of percussion, it's probably less weird because percussion is where I think John Cage said this, like it's like the point where kind of like tonality and music meets noise. So it's like that little place is I think where you guys are in a lot of your pieces that are you commission, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As a whole, maybe, yeah, it's pretty weird. But like as a part, it's not that, you know? Yeah.
But there's definitely
Yeah.
there's some weirder stuff we've done.
I want to hear what is the weirdest. Okay, this is such a dumb question, but can you say, or do you feel comfortable saying, like, what's some of the
We'll have
weirdest
to think about
things
it.
that you've done?
Think about it.
I
But
have-
also, weird is a badge of like
It's good.
greatness in ours. We're like, yeah, that was weird.
yeah.
Weird
So
is
it's
good.
good if
yeah,
that
weird is
scales.
totally good.
Yeah, it's a positive. It's
Totally.
a positive word.
Yeah,
Yeah. The weirder the better in some ways.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Totally.
What is the weirdest?
Well,
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
And I
yeah,
think-
we have more episodes of this show to do, so I think we'll get there.
And I want to just say that maybe in a way that instead of just saying just weird, maybe there is the other components of being unusual, you know?
Yeah.
To,
Oh yeah, that word again.
Non-traditional. Yeah,
Yeah.
Unconventional, I guess we could say.
Meaning original, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unusual as an original.
it is. It is a very, very unique piece for us in a lot of.
Unique. Oh,
And
that's a good
yeah,
one.
I would say that I can't think of anything that functions in quite the same way with. Yeah, and the combination of sort of visual stimulus for us in combination with sound production, I think that is really unique for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, when I first saw Yarn Wire, it was in this piece that where there was like blocks being moved around and stuff. So that was pretty unconventional. I mean, that was why I was like, wow, that's amazing that these people are doing this, you know? And so that even back then, and I can't remember when that was, but it was probably like 2006 or something. Does that do y'all even know what the piece is that I'm talking about?
It could be one of two things, I'm wondering.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
I
trying
just
to
remember like a
sounds vaguely
black
familiar.
background. Like it was very black in the video.
And were the people blue? No, like blue lighting.
No.
Okay.
Like Blue Man Group blue? No, not blue. No, it was very
Like
it was
warm
very
lighting?
almost like chess
It might have been-
or something.
might
Like
have
it was
been
like watching
Mariante's
like a
piece.
chess game.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, Mariante's or a David Bethel piece. I'm wondering.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
Interesting.
those definitely fit the bill for that.
Mhm.
Those are weird. Those pieces
Yeah.
are weird.
Yeah, it's weird. but the thing is, like, just the fact that you chose that to put in as the video that you put in the grant says something about, you know, like what you're doing, which that was what was so cool about it. I was just
I
like,
would love to hear that panel discussion.
Yeah, me too.
it was so fun. It was such a cool discussion. It was just like, what is this? Like what? And which is like my jam. Like what is this? Like, what is this piece? I like some people were like, I don't understand this. And I was like, this is amazing. It was just like one of those discussions that you want to have in a panel, you know?
Nice.
Nice.
So, yeah. It was good. It was a good panel. I remember that. Yeah.
Nice. So we went all the way back to 2006, the very beginnings of Yarn Wire.
Yeah.
That's right.
Cool.
Well, I don't want to cut us off because it really feels like we always say these conversations could just go on. And it's so fun to talk with everybody and to see both you, Magdalena, and you, Olivia. It's so wonderful. And now, since you're both in Chicago, hopefully you can see each other in real life at some point.
Totally.
When
yeah.
things calm
in the
down.
later times.
Yeah.
Post-COVID, for sure.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
So
And it's so fun to talk to you guys again. Sorry, Laura, to interrupt.
Absolutely. No, it's okay. So with that, again, a final thank you to our guests today, and a reminder to all of you watching that our next episode of Feedback is coming up this Thursday, November 19th, and we're going to be chatting with Zasha De Castri and Erica Scheinberg. And I will definitely also remind everyone that's watching to please support this project by visiting patreon.com, where you can subscribe at a number of different levels. But the cool thing about it is that for whatever subscription you choose, you get access to very cool bonus features like bonus playlists. Olivia made a great one for today's show, in fact, and custom ringtones made by Russell and me, which you really don't want to miss out on. I'll send you one,
I want
Olivia,
one.
for sure. Okay. That'll be an unofficial bonus for all of our guests. So please check it out. We really appreciate all of your support, and thanks for watching.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.